On this Thursday night, the protests and disruption spread from Ottawa's airport targeted to border blockades at several key international crossings. Supply lines cut, auto plants closing, jobs are on the line, and the federal Tory leader changes her tune.
The economy you want to see reopen is hurting.
Also tonight, 30,000 Russian troops begin military drills in the Black Sea.
The biggest security crisis that Europe has faced for decades.
And peak performance. Canadian Olympians rack up more medals, delivering one of their best days at the Winter Olympics.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin again tonight with the protests and disruptions in Canada. They're spilling out to new fronts and putting people out of work. Ford, GM, Toyota and other auto plants on both sides of the border have had to scale back and shut down because of this. Protesters blocking the flow of goods across the Canada-US border. And in Ottawa, trucks and protesters continue to occupy streets near Parliament Hill. And this happened at Ottawa's airport. A convoy of vehicles circled, honking and shouting freedom. At least one of them saying Ontario Premier Doug Ford has to go.
Get after your premiers. Get after him. We want him gone. Put someone else in charge for now, and we build from there.
Ottawa police report what they call a concerted effort to flood 911 lines. The force tweeting this endangers lives and is completely unacceptable. And there are several other sites. Apart from Parliament Hill, that appear to be staging grounds for protesters. Encampments to the east and the south, and reports of others, including one more than 35 kilometers away from the city centre. That suggests the possibility of tactical planning and strategy. Well, after 2 weeks of this, the pressure on politicians and authorities to find a solution is intensifying. Today, the leader of the federal Conservatives reversed course and said this.
To all of you who are taking part in the protests, I believe the time has come for you to take down the barricades, stop the disruptive action, and come together.
There is a lot to get to tonight. We begin with Ross Lord in Ottawa.
2 weeks into the stalemate, this encampment has become a vital supply depot for the occupation. Everything from food to fuel. Protesters are receiving so many supplies, they're turning donations away. John Bancroft, who owns an excavator business in British Columbia, is helping coordinate.
There's no one has a job here. There's no organization other than Canada coming together here.
Ottawa police say they've negotiated for a dozen more trucks to leave this encampment, plus 10 others from another part of the city. But that's a small percentage of the overall number, and other protesters say they are far from finished. Some activity is from anonymous sources. An Ottawa City Council committee meeting was hacked with an unapproved message on YouTube. There was also a flood of unnecessary 911 calls that disrupted the city's emergency phone system. An act of sabotage that Bancroft insists had nothing to do with the so-called Freedom Convoy.
Clogging the lines, that's going to create safety concerns. Proper emergencies that are actually happening will not be able to get through, and that's not what we stand for, and I'll put my word on that.
Ottawa police say they've traced a large number of the fake 911 calls to Convoy supporters in the United States. There are signs protesters are spreading out, disrupting traffic to the airport, among other areas, making it harder for police to contain it.
Opening up different areas, different camp posts at different parts of the city puts different pressure on the police service with their limited resources to try then to deal with those particular areas.
The federal government says more help is on the way.
The RCMP are going to be sending additional reinforcements to Ottawa. I can also advise that the RCMP will be sending reinforcements to Windsor. And in addition to that, the RCMP have added additional resources in Coutts in Alberta.
We have been enforcing the law from day one.
For police, there are some victories, like persuading truckers to leave this downtown section.
Well, it's good news. I just walked, I arrived at this corner moments ago, and I said, oh, great, because last time I was down here, there were trucks up to Nepean. So it's progress.
But until all of the unwelcome visitors leave, life in Ottawa is a long way from returning to normal 2 weeks on. Ross Lord, Global News, Ottawa.
Now to the impact at Canada's busiest border crossing. A peaceful protest is legal in Canada, blocking highways in the U.S.-Canada border for days and restricting the rights and freedoms of others is not. The protest on the Ambassador Bridge from Windsor to Detroit has cut supply lines and is now costing jobs. Sean O'Shea is in Windsor for us again tonight. Sean?
Donna, 4 days into this bridge blockade, both countries are starting to see the economic impacts, especially the auto manufacturing sector.
Yeah, buddy.
Protesters refuse to budge and take pride in the pain they're inflicting.
We are costing the mayor, Doug Ford, all the people a lot of money.
This group is still camped on the Canadian side of the Ambassador Bridge linking Windsor to Detroit. On a normal day, $450 million worth of goods crosses here. With the bridge link fully closed, manufacturers are losing business and their employees are losing work.
The potential for more layoffs and additional reduced hours is just going to increase.
Ford temporarily shut down its engine plant here and cut a shift from its assembly plant in Oakville. Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, shortened shifts at several plants. And Toyota said it would not manufacture anything at 3 Canadian plants for the rest of the week.
The law needs to be enforced. This is too important of a piece of infrastructure for the Canadian economy, and this is now hurting Canadian jobs.
The frustration attracting more American media by the day. When a Fox News crew showed up, they were welcomed enthusiastically by the crowd.
Prime Minister!
Contrast that with what outlets like Global News are experiencing. Over the past day, the first signs of police tactical units have shown up. Ontario Provincial Police have arrived too, and concrete barriers are being set up, designed to prevent more vehicles from joining the blockade.
They need to step up because clearly whatever they've been doing to this point hasn't been working.
More here justify their actions, even while acknowledging their own neighbors will be financially hurt by this shutdown.
We're not the ones stopping this economy. Trudeau has halted this economy long before we're here. That's why we're here.
As for how long this protest could go on, that's anybody's guess. But the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, asked Canadian authorities today to do something about it right now. In her words, it's simple. It's time to reopen traffic on the bridge. Donna.
All right, Sean O'Shea in Windsor, Ontario, thank you. Well, much of the disruption and now the loss of jobs is happening in Ontario. That province's Liberal leader has accused Premier Doug Ford of being invisible. And now there are reports Doug Ford is considering speeding up the plan to ease public health restrictions. Eric Sorensen reports.
Ontario is bearing the brunt of disruptions from Ottawa to the border crossings, but one major political figure has been out of sight. Premier Ford issued a statement that the ongoing illegal occupation and blockade happening in Ontario must stop, adding that he's confident our police forces in Ontario, the Mounties and border services will take the appropriate steps. Ontario's Liberal leader says Ford must do more than that.
Doug Ford's been in hiding. Weak statements, tweets that were likely written by other people, that's not leadership in the midst of a crisis.
Now it's time to let the people in Ottawa get back to their lives.
That was more than a week ago when Ford last took questions on camera about the protests. One reason for Ford's low profile, an election just months away, says this analyst.
He doesn't want to necessarily come out and embrace the various activities, but at the same time, he doesn't want to polarize anybody who's sympathetic to him.
Ontario Public Health plans to recommend lifting some COVID restrictions next week, but not because protesters are demanding it.
Without any external pressure, because I don't really watch the news too much, we are absolutely committed to removing public health measures in a timely, evidence-based, science-driven manner.
Across the country, governments are shifting ground on COVID restrictions.
It is time to remove these restrictive and damaging health measures.
Alberta, the first to drop vaccine mandates. Others are resisting pressure to do so too quickly.
One of the most important things that we have now on our side is that tool of protection through vaccination.
We're still not out of this.
One epidemiologist is worried that amid the protests, trust in science is being politicized.
And as a result, we have protesters, fringe thinking that seems to be dictating some of this policy. And not surprisingly, the policy is falling along ideological lines.
For governments and police, there's reluctance to be heavy-handed with so-called freedom protests, but with supply chains being disrupted, the incentive to take action is growing.
That could give politicians far more license to get involved without being seem to be cracking down on freedom, but instead being trying to defend the economy.
Back in Ontario, the Attorney General obtained a court order late today to prohibit anyone from disposing of or dealing with monetary donations through the Freedom Convoy and Adopt a Trucker campaign by way of the Give, Send, Go online fundraising platform. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
So where are Canada's federal political leaders on all this? The Prime Minister has implored the protesters to go home. The opposition Conservatives have supported the protesters and called on Justin Trudeau to meet with them. Today, the new interim Conservative leader reversed course on part of that position and called on the protesters to go home. Does that signal newfound political unity? Well, David Aiken is with me from Ottawa. David?
Well, Donna, it was the threat to critical infrastructure, the real economic damage, that forced the Conservatives to change their minds on the blockades.
To all of you who are taking part in the protests, I believe the time has come for you to take down the barricades, stop the disruptive action, and come together.
Last week, interim Conservative leader Candice Bergen had posed for pictures with Ottawa protesters and encouraged them to stay. But now, in a speech in Parliament, she pleaded with protesters to leave.
The economy you want to see reopen is hurting. Farmers, manufacturers, small businesses, and families are suffering. I believe this is not what you want to do.
Same with Kevin Waugh, the Conservative who chairs his party's Saskatchewan caucus. That caucus, including former leader Andrew Scheer, also posed with truckers last week, and now Waugh wants them to go.
The Convoy's done one thing, changed minds in this country. It's time to move on.
The Conservative call to end the blockades came as they pressed the Trudeau government to come up with a plan to end federal vaccine mandates and to table that plan by the end of the month. Not necessarily an end to the mandates themselves, just a roadmap explaining to Canadians how and when they'll end.
2 years into this pandemic, and given the current circumstances, it's not an unreasonable request.
MPs will vote on this idea later this week, but it sounds like the PM will vote against it.
Do you know what helps lift restrictions? Do you know what helps move beyond lockdowns? Vaccinations.
Finally, Donna, just as the Conservative position on the blockades has now evolved, the position of some Liberals on vaccine mandates also continues to change. A second Quebec Liberal MP, Yves Robillard, has joined Joel Lightbound in calling on their own government to change their position on vaccine mandates.
All right, David Aiken in Ottawa, thank you. There is also a Canada-U.S. border crossing blocked in Manitoba at Emerson. Protesters are using farm equipment and semi-trucks there to block the Emerson-Pembina border crossing. The RCMP says no traffic is getting through in either direction. Manitoba's Justice Minister says it's time for the protest to end.
It can't go on forever. I think that a point has been made. I think that their point has been heard. And I think that there's going to come a time when absolutely we have to move on from this.
He's calling on the federal government to do what it can to lower the temperature with the protesters. And in Alberta, protesters are again blocking traffic at the Coots border crossing. That blockade resumed late Tuesday. Protesters say they will stay put, even though Alberta's premier has ended the proof of vaccination requirement there. Heather Yurix West is near Milk River, where an encampment of supporters is growing. Heather, how have the RCMP stepped up enforcement?
They have been issuing a soft touch enforcement plan, is what they call it, issuing tickets and asking protesters to leave. That has not been successful so far. The border remains blocked, and this encampment has grown this afternoon. It's about a kilometer worth of people and trucks here camping in the ditch and on the highway. And protesters that we've spoken with say that they are here for the long haul, even with RCMP issuing tickets. They say that until vaccine mandates and COVID restrictions are lifted, not only in Alberta but across the country, until those go away, they say that they will stay put.
I just feel that we have to stand for freedom. I know that the more people that we have standing for freedom, the stronger we all are together. A ticket to me is a small price to pay at this point.
Standing your ground means standing your ground. Hold the line. That's very easy statement. And so you can read into that, but plain and simple, it's people are not going to back down.
So they say they're not moving, Heather. I guess that means the RCMP have to do something else. What does it mean for the border crossing itself?
Yeah, it is completely blocked. I can tell you yesterday there were about 70 trucks lined up here in Milk River hoping to get across the border. That traffic has since left, either returning home or in search of another route into the U.S. Now, the RCMP did tell us in an update yesterday that protesters do need to go and that their goal is to reopen traffic flowing across the border. We have asked them today what they plan to do next, given that their soft touch approach with ticketing does not seem to be working. We have not received an answer. So at this point, it appears to be an impasse here in southern Alberta. Donna?
Okay, Heather Yurix West near Milk River, Alberta tonight. Thanks. Protests developing in Europe. Coming up, what police in France are doing to stop demonstrators from gathering in Paris. Protests against public health restrictions and vaccine mandates are happening in other parts of the world. This is New Zealand, where police arrested 122 people on the grounds of Parliament today, the third day of protests there. And in Europe, a convoy is making its way to Paris for a demonstration tomorrow. French police say they intend to stop protesters from driving into the capital, warning vehicles are banned from blocking roads and drivers will face consequences should they attempt to go ahead. Crystal Gamansing reports.
Honking horns, a familiar sound to Canadians, but this is France. Trucks, cars, motorcycles, and yes, Canadian flags are out on the streets. These vehicles are a part of the European Freedom Convoy, apparently inspired by actions first seen in Ottawa.
On regarde le Canadien.
We saw the Canadians and we said to ourselves, it's awesome what they are doing. And in 8 days, boom, something was triggered. It's unclear who started the European convoy, but it appears to have support from France's Yellow Vest protesters. In 2018, the group flooded the streets of Paris and at times clashed with police. Escalations from demonstrations that first started over rising fuel prices.
C'est infernal.
I can't stand the pass anymore. It's hell, says this man. We must return to normal. Ending all COVID-19 restrictions seem to be one of the group's demands. French police are getting out ahead of the convoy's arrival in Paris Friday. Gatherings in the streets are now prohibited between Friday and Monday, and citizens have been warned about penalties for obstructing or interfering with open roads, up to 2 years in jail and 4,500 euros in fines, plus immobilization and impoundment of vehicles. It's true that it's been said that they cannot enter Paris, but I think that they cannot block everyone from entering. It's impossible. So I think they must force it. French authorities are on alert, as are officials in Belgium. After Paris, the European Freedom Convoy is expected to make its way to Brussels, the headquarters of the European Union. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Flexing their firepower ahead, Russia stages joint military drills with Belarus. Prince Charles has tested positive for COVID-19 for a second time. The heir to the British throne has cancelled all his upcoming engagements and is self-isolating. He is triple vaccinated. On Wednesday, Prince Charles and his wife Camilla mingled with dozens of people at a reception. There are reports he also met the Queen 2 days ago at Windsor. She's being closely monitored. Prince Charles had COVID in March of 2020 with only mild symptoms. Russia has begun joint military drills with Belarus, a close ally of Russia. About 30,000 Russian troops are believed to be taking part in the exercises. NATO says it is Moscow's biggest deployment to Belarus since the Cold War. Belarus shares a long border with Ukraine. Russia has amassed more than 100,000 troops along its own border with Ukraine, surrounding it on 3 sides. NATO has stepped up military deployments to bolster its eastern flank in Poland and Romania.
This is probably the most dangerous moment, I would say, in the course of the next few days, in what is the biggest security crisis that Europe has faced for decades, and we've got to get it right.
Russia continues to say it has no plans to invade Ukraine and demands the West keep Ukraine and other former Soviet republics out of NATO. Next, from skates to skis, Team Canada shines brighter with a cluster of new medals. Canada's Isabelle Weideman skated her way to even more Olympic success. Weideman won the silver medal in the women's speed skating 5,000 meters. It is the 26-year-old's second medal in Beijing. She won bronze in the 3,000-meter race. Quebec's Elliott Grandin came within a hair of Olympic gold in snowboard cross. He lost by just 2/100ths of a second, really a photo finish. Grandin is only 20 years old and is now the youngest ever snowboard cross Olympic medalist. And Team Canada is jumping into the history books. Freestyle skiers Marion Thénault, Miha Fontaine, and Louis Irving won bronze in the first ever Olympic mixed team aerials event, which made its debut in Beijing. And Toronto's Jack Crawford clinched Canada's first ever bronze medal in combined alpine skiing. Crawford absolutely crushed his downhill section, putting down the second fastest time, and capped it off with a strong performance in slalom to stay in medal contention. And with all that, Canada is now ranked third, winning 1 gold medal, 4 silver, and 7 bronze. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Here Canada is Winnipeg, Manitoba. Ah, look at that. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.